Welcome back. 26 government workers were injured in what the State Department calls health attacks for now in their homes and hotels in Havana, Cuba, and it began in late 2016. Another U.S. worker in China this year claims this as well. And now U.S. officials tell NBC News they now have a main suspect in these attacks, Russia. U.S. officials say they have evidence pointing to Russia from communications intercepts collected during an ongoing investigation by the FBI, the CIA, and other U.S. agencies. Essentially, they seem to hear Russia bragging about doing this. But the evidence isn't conclusive enough yet for the U.S. to formally blame Moscow for the attacks that began in 2016 and have continued through earlier this year, which is causing a major rupture in renewed diplomatic relations with Havana. Now, the so-called health attacks led the Trump administration to remove most of its diplomats and spies from the island. The State Department today said they haven't assigned any blame, technically, and their investigation is still ongoing. They said there is no known cause and no known individual or group believed to be responsible at this time. Let's bring more on this story. Let me bring in one of my colleagues behind this report. Josh Lederman is a national political reporter for us here at NBC News. And Evelyn Farkas is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia in the Obama administration, and she is now an NBC News national security analyst as well. All right, Josh, let me start with you. This is your scoop. So they have discovered, they believe it's Russia just based on Russia bragging about it. Is that at the end of the day, and I'm being a little shorthand here, is that the best way to describe this?
Well, there's a few factors that have led them to think that Russia is the most likely culprit at this point. The fact that Russia is one of the only countries in the world that would have the actual technical ability to carry out something this advanced. The fact that Russia has a massive intelligence apparatus on the island of Cuba. They have an interest in creating havoc with the U.S., possibly driving Cuba away from the West. And also this signals intelligence, these intercepted communications that U.S. officials tell NBC News they have developed about this case.
Do they have a lead on the actual technology yet, though? What is the, I mean, that to me seems to be the missing piece here.
They have a few leads. They do think that microwave technology was likely involved in this, but officials also tell us that it's possible that there were at least one or two additional technologies that could have been used in addition or in conjunction with microwaves.
Okay. Is this what? Somebody's aims an antenna, a microwave antenna at somebody's house? I mean, help me out here. A van, I've heard some people say, oh, they saw a van drive away, so a van just comes close to a diplomat's house. Is that basically how they think this works?
The situations have really varied from case to case. There have been reports that someone saw a speeding van driving away. Some folks heard things above their basically on the roof and thought it might have been coming from above. But one thing that is consistent in all of the cases that the State Department has confirmed is that it seems to be coming from a specific direction. People report it seemed like it was coming from the left or the right, and then my effects were more, I lost hearing on my right side in line with where it seemed to be coming from.
So the idea of, by the way, I know one of the theories was mass hysteria, which has been one of the theories that maybe everybody thinks something happened and nothing did. Has that been ruled out?
It has been ruled out. Top officials up to and including Deputy Secretary of State Sullivan believe that there's no way that the medical findings here are things one could not fake. You can't actually fake these kinds of balance tests that they're putting these diplomats through, and they believe they have real findings that show something happened, and now they just have to figure out what.
All right, Evelyn.
Yes.
Why are we stopping short of blaming the Russians? If we explain why signals intelligence isn't enough for us to say, you know what, it's you, Moscow.
Well, it depends how much we have, and then, of course, how we got it, what we have, we may not want to reveal because we're continuing to use that to collect, to continue to look at what the Russians are doing and saying. So I think we try to get other information from humans and other sources. And then ultimately, you don't really want to come out publicly saying, for sure the Russians did it, unless you have something you can show and then something you're going to do, right? Because you can't just say, oh, they attacked us, and then what, right? I mean, so the government's not going to come out, just like the British waited. I'm sure they had a lot of intelligence on the Novichok attacks, on the nerve agents that were used in Salisbury, England. They waited until they had a sense of what they were going to do. They were going to go to the UN and they were going to show the pictures and show the whole timeline. So I think the same thing goes for the U.S. government. Even if the intelligence community has, let's say, strong confidence, high confidence level is the term they would use, they still might wait until they have a policy decision about what to do.
Well, and this seems to be the challenge here. we keep sanctioning Russia for all of the bad things that they do.
Right.
Whether it's interference in our election, if it's what they did to British citizens. Okay, you add this to it. You have Crimea. At some point, like, aren't we out of sanctions? Like, this seems to be, it's not working. A sanctions policy isn't working.
Yeah. And Chuck, this feels to me a lot like, if you remember when the Obama administration sanctioned the Russians for interfering in our elections, they also sanctioned them for mistreating U.S. personnel in Moscow. I don't know if you remember that,
with the
right?
harassment campaign.
And part of it involved a guy that was maybe an intelligence agent for the U.S. who had basically had to run in and seek refuge in the embassy, and the Russian guard tried to keep him out, right? So they were acting actually illegally according to international law, because you're supposed to protect U.S. personnel who are under diplomatic cover, right? These attacks feel a little bit like that, a little bit of spy on spy. So it seems like they might have been singling out people who they thought were intelligence agents, maybe were intelligence agents, and their families. And that may also complicate our reaction. Because even under Obama, when we had reset, remember, we had a guy that was arrested. The media said he might have been a CIA agent. He had a blonde wig. The Russians certainly said he was an intelligence agent. And whatever retaliatory measures we took at the time probably were more in the intel channels.
Josh, today the State Department they didn't push back on our reporting, but they were pushing back on the idea that, hey, we're not ready to name anybody. Why are they so? Do you get the sense that there are people at the State Department that feel as if people are slow walking this, and that's why this is getting out, and people are concerned about it, or they're just being deliberate?
It's a combination of both. The State Department, for some of the reasons Evelyn pointed out, doesn't want to come out and say Russia has been beaming our diplomats and causing brain injury until they have checked every box and dotted every I and are ready to say what they're going to do about it. But beyond that, there is a sense of frustration within the State Department, within other agencies like the CIA, where people have been affected by these incidents, to say, look, this has been going on since the end of 2016. The Novichok example that you mentioned, it was within a matter of weeks that the international community came out and said, this happened, it has to stop. And in this case, it has been dragging on. It's continuing to happen into this year with really no public answers.
And Evelyn, one way to sort of show that we certainly don't blame the Cubans is to then restore, send our diplomats back.
Yeah.
This is where Putin played, I think, a very smart game here. The new administration was looking for a reason to get out of Cuba. And this handed the State Department an excuse to get out of Cuba. Do you think we go back?
I think we have to. I mean, we have to show our resolve, right?
Yeah.
But and President Trump now, I mean, this is almost taunting him to not give up, even though he really did want to walk away from Cuba, absolutely, which was also upsetting to many Republican members of Congress who were interested in the commercial aspects of ag and all of that. But I think the other interesting element you could look at really addressing is the Cuban role. So the Cubans must have known this was going on. But at the same time...
But I thought our FBI was pretty confident going, you know what? They may not know who did this.
They may not have. And so here's another issue. It's also Russians, again, violating the sovereignty of Cuba.
Another country.
So in a way, it's kind of the same ilk as killing people on British soil, right?
Josh, you get any hint that the State Department thinks the Cubans helped?
We know that they have certainly not ruled out the possibility that either the Cubans or perhaps some type of rogue element of the government that was the hardliners who are
I've heard that theory.
Rochemont could have been involved. But certainly beyond saying that Cuba is responsible for the safety of all diplomats on the soil, the State Department has not sought to go after the Cubans in that way.
No, you did. You get the sense that many in Cuba are upset that this blew up the relationship. Anyway. What a fascinating. Josh, Evelyn, thank you both very much. I have a feeling we're going to keep coming back to this story. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.